My most recent book is called Death of Civilization, and it kind of talks about the veneer of civilization that exists on top of the chaos that we see in our country, and how that veneer seems to wear thinner all the time.
Today's video is brought to us by Mantis. The Mantis family of products is integral to ASP staff building handgun and carbine skills, and are your most economical and fastest path to improvement in your skills too. Whether you choose the X10, the Laser Academy, the Blackbeard, or use them all in concert, they will help your practice be more effective, efficient, and fun. Go check them out, pick up a unit, and thank them for sponsoring today's video.
And people are less polite, less tactful, less even capable of the kind of civilized discourse or action that we grew up expecting, or being taught, at least I did. And talking about how I think it's maybe not misguided, but a little short-sighted at least, to say, well, I'm going to prep and I'm going to get my gun, I'm going to get my food stored up in my house, and boy, if things really go south, we're going to ride it out and I just think it's very unrealistic, because when of course I spend most of my time in places where failure of civility is an everyday occurrence.
Yeah.
And in places like that, the lone wolf guy that is holed up in his house is just the first guy to get robbed, because everybody knows he's got. And so the book talks more about, actually takes from a military manual that I found in Afghanistan years ago called Human Terrain Mapping, and it talks about basically getting to know your environment, your neighborhood, and getting to know, starting to map out, make connections. We don't really do that anymore. Most people don't even know their neighbors' names. But making connections and starting to get to know those people and figure out, what do they do for a living? What can they bring to the table if there is a failure of civility, or a generalized or localized disaster or scenario or something like that? Where are the people who are vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, the invalid that might need help in a time like that? Where are the people that I'm probably need to look out for because that looks like a meth house, or whatever? Start to sort of map out those connections and maybe form a preparedness group, so to speak, in my neighborhood, and as in this book that I'm working on now is talking about in my church. It doesn't have to be just a men's group, but it can be anything. So how does working together as a team come into play in the lessons that you've learned with helping people be safe in places or events that are life-threatening?
It's an interesting question, because I always tell folks, listen, you can't assume anyone else is coming to help. Even as a police officer, we do a couple of badge cams a week, and cops are notorious for this. They'll be, shooting with one hand on the radio with another. Shots fired, shots fired. They're basically, hollering into their diary. They're writing into their diary, I'm in trouble. I'm scared. I'm having a gunfight. Nobody's going to be there in time to help you, man. Just solve the problem in front of you. Get on the radio when you can get some help there in a coherent way. And same thing, nobody's coming to save you. But imagine this, if I always say, when I feel safest, when I'm with one of my best friends. I call Neil Widener my very best friend on earth, Mike Williver my very best friend on earth. We all work together too. And when the three of us go out in public, is the only time that I'll sit with my back to the door, because one of those guys has got the other side of that, and we are. The sum is greater than its parts, right? Because we all can work off of each other's strengths and help each other and understand what each other's missions are. When our kids were little, Laura was not a part of my self-defense plan. She was responsible to make sure that if something went south, that she got the kids away from me as fast as possible, so that I could deal with the problem and she could keep the kids safe. And so when everybody has a plan, then and when we work together, then we multiply and amplify our abilities. And I think that works even better in communities. So, if you say, oh, okay, wait a minute, we're just going to hunker down in our house, well, then we are the few of us. That's maybe you and your spouse, maybe you and your wife, maybe you and your wife and your adult child. Um, and I say that in a gender neutral way. I've seen some young women who are pretty BA who can get down,
Hmm.
and some young men who that's not their thing. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But then if I can combine that with, hey, and my next door neighbor and my neighbor down the block, and several folks from church and some people in my martial arts community, or the kids on, people in my kids softball team, and we all know each other, and so then we come together as a group. And when we see that there's problems, or that we detect it's a problem, we call each other. We say, I love Nehemiah. When Nehemiah said, when he stood them along the wall, when they're rebuilding the wall, and he put them in families, and they lived where they were building. And he said, listen,
Hmm.
we will have the horn. And when you hear the horn, you come running and help us. And when we hear your horn, we'll come running and help you. And when we do that as a community, then when they had that in Nehemiah chapter 4, then Sanballat and Tobiah, they knew they were defeated. They were like, we're not going to be able to get over on these guys. And so they were able to build a wall. And of course, the walls
Yeah.
of Jerusalem had a defensive function, a protective function, but also an outward facing function. That when we are strong and protected here, then we can reach out from our base from a place of safety and strength in order to impact and help other people and bring more goodness where we are. So I think
Yeah.
when we work together, so in self-defense sense, if dad's not just the one carrying a gun, maybe mom does too, not because we want to have more bullets flying left and right, but because then we can work together.
Hmm.
And then we know, wait a minute, what's your job here? What's my job here? And we've communicated that so that from a place of strength, we don't have to cower in fear and worry, but we can be proactive in love. And I think that's the heart of loving neighbor. I mean, the great,
Yeah.
it's a pretty simple world, really. When we try to follow Jesus, it's it's not always easy. But the great commandment is pretty simple. It's love God and love people. Like, it's not overly complicated. And when I'm in a place of strength that I know I'm okay, then I can love people lavishly and not worry about the back end of
Hmm.
things. So
Yeah.
the more we can get together in community to do that, well, then the better we can do at building bridges and loving people. And man, I think that when we're talking about people being incivil, when we're talking about people being, fractured and those things, it's up to me to, from a place of strength and love, to build bridges from there. And listen, I love you too. Let me help you. Yes, we differ on ideological things. I don't care. You're human. I long to bring you the presence of King Jesus. And that means I want to have you in my home. I want to love you well. I want to make sure that you understand that I'm for you and not against you. And so the more we do that, then we strengthen those bonds together in community. And that's like, as a guy that's an advocate for the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, I'm like, look, I just want all my friends who are all about gun control to know, not that I'm a gun owner, but that I love them
Hmm.
and that I care for
Yeah.
them and that I
Yeah.
believe in them and that I'm here for
Yeah.
them. And
And
then
that
when
is
they
the
think
point.
about, gosh, man, then they come and say, John, I don't understand this argument. I don't understand this, why you don't believe that. And now we can dialogue and we can love each other
Hmm.
well in civility.
Because you've earned the right to do so. Yeah, that's very
Exactly
good.
right.